episode of the Straight Up Chicago Investor Podcast. I'm Tom Shellcross. With me, as always, is Mark Ainley. Mark, you're grinning over there. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. We got build your team page is again, month over month has been biggest page. Yeah, it's killing it. So hopefully those calls and that business is getting back to our team that we are recommending. So excited about having that. Check it out if you haven't checked it out yet. StraightUpChicagoInvestor.com. Right on the homepage, there's a big button that says "Build Your Team." A whole bunch of different resources on there for tax testing, for lending, commercial lending, attorneys, home inspection, architects, accountants, contractors, staging, so forth.
Yeah, man. If you get a hookup too, let us know. Like we were at the soiree last week, and we found the gentleman who had just started at Essex from hearing the Essex commercial. And it's like, I have my job because I found that through the podcast. I was like, holy crap! Like, please tell me more. That's so good.
Yeah, any of that feedback we get, we love to hear it. If someone that we recommended or you connected with worked out. If it didn't work out, we
let us know too, but it will.
No, I'm joking. We'll always take that feedback if there's any way we can ever help. But we recommend these people. I'm a big connector, and I recommend these people because of I know they'll do good for you and in your journey. When you have a team that you could trust, you have room to make mistakes because your team will your team won't let you make mistakes. So that's the great part about it. So
yeah,
we're talking about appraisals today, man. I know you like this topic.
I feel it's funny to say I feel like I'm good at it, right? Meaning like I'm good at, saying like coming with the appropriate data, not overwhelming people. We just had a cash out refi this morning. We just had an appraisal. So we'll see how that goes. Maybe I'll eat my words next week.
Well, with today's guest, it's funny. We talk about appraisals a lot. We talk about with the lender side, but to ask some of the same questions, I wonder if we'll at least get solidified if some of our advice to everyone else is right when we speak on behalf of these appraisers. So I'm excited to hear about that.
Yeah, maybe everything I do is wrong. Who knows? We'll find out.
Yeah. Housing provider tip. We'll roll right into this. So I'm going to keep it on the theme of appraisals today. If you got appraiser appraisal coming up, make sure you do all the work on the front end. You hear about the option of being able to contest an appraiser. A lot of times when you're going to contest an appraisal, do it on the front end. Get all your due diligence and get your information, whether it be information or things that are in your head. Make sure someone else knows it before the appraisal gets done, because you might not have the chance on the back end, or it's going to be a much larger, steeper ask on the back end to get something you want. So make sure for appraisers you're going into with it being proactive, not reactive.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Let's hear about today's guest.
Today's guest, he is been in the business back in the day, and not back in the day 2018 for some of our new investors, but back in the day, I think the early 2000s. So he got into it as a real estate agent. He's one of the top brokers now. He actually worked for GC for about 5 years during the course. Now he's with Keller Williams, but he has been around the block. He comes from a family of developers, and he is an appraiser, and that's what we wanted to bring on here for his expertise today. And without further ado, I want to introduce Steve Zidek. All right, Steve, welcome, man. We're excited to have you here. You and me have known each other for a really long time.
Yeah, we have.
Before we dive in, we're going to talk a lot about appraisals, talk about other things you've done here, but like you come from a family, you got developers in your family. You guys did a lot of work in what today modern day Bloomingdale. Tell us a little bit about kind of that always excites me about you.
Yeah. My family moved from West Side Chicago. My grandfather, who had long ago passed, was a surgeon, and he moved from West Side Chicago and just bought a lot of land out in what is now, well, it was known then as Bloomingdale as well, but it was hardly the Bloomingdale of today. It was Lake Street was the only paved road there, so it was obviously, it was in the early 50s. It was. So owned a lot of land. I think it was 160, 170 acres at one point initially out in Bloomingdale. And then over the years, of course, sold off to what became a shopping center, where the old Dominic's, if you remember that, across the street there. Portillo's is there, but there was quite a bit of land across Lake Street. And then what then became on their side, where my grandmother and my great aunt lived, that became an assisted living facility years and years later, probably 30 years ago at this point. So there was definitely some development. Some of the land was taken through eminent domain, through the forest preserve. On the back end, it was all just, forestry and quarry. But no, quite a bit of land initially for quite a while that we had, and some of which was ended up being developed. But for us, and before it was developed, it was motorbike tracks and forestry that we could run around and goof off in. But not much of that left in that area anymore.
Well, I think about the other story is the Chaudines that bought hundreds of acres out in Geneva, which is actually where your office is now.
Sure.
I mean that 3 generations ago they started just buying land, and I think it's so hard for myself included, but all of us listeners of that land that just seems so far out there these days is someday going to be very valuable land to develop, and it's hard to wrap your hands around kind of investing into that now.
No, for sure, and that's what my grandmother had said since then. Basically, just buy and hold. The time will end. Eventually prosper, whether it's land or stocks or anything. So no, if you go far enough out there, eventually people will catch up, and it'll be interest to it.
What's this where you insert here, Tom? This is where you put your saying.
What's my saying? I don't know.
Asset is or time is your asset.
No, time is your biggest asset. I thought you were talking about like land. I was like, I've never developed land in the burbs. What are you talking about?
No, time is your biggest
time
asset.
Is the biggest asset. Like the best performing deals in your portfolio are the ones you have owned the longest.
Absolutely.
We're gonna get you a shirt with that on there. I love it.
It's like the third time you've said my saying, and I didn't know what it was, but now I'm starting to come around that. Okay, I'm associated with this saying.
You should write your things on the wall to remind yourself of them, I guess.
It was nuggets for a while, and now it's time is your asset. So come on, you got to know what your thing is. Well, Steve, you are I'm pretty sure, Tom, right? You're our first appraiser we've had on the show here, 200 and some episodes in. So wow. It's exciting to talk about some of these things today. I think some of these conversations we'll have today are a little more relevant even, but tell me what made you, appraisals are very detail oriented. They take a lot of time. You just got to be very exact. You got to do a lot of research, like in a small window. Like, what made you say, like, this is a good idea? I'm going to get my appraisal license.
You know what? What's I think unique about me and my coming into appraisal world is that I was a realtor first. I was a realtor in 2004 when everybody and their brother started becoming a realtor because the market was super hot. So I became a realtor part-time in 2004. And I enjoyed, a few years of pretty good success, as most people in real estate did at that time. And it just so happened, of course, as we all know, what happened after 2008, things definitely took a big turn. And I came to the decision at that point, I was part-time brokerage. I had a corporate job in finance. And so I was already on the analytics side in that regard. I had done sales before too. I kind of did both of that, but I was on a detail-oriented position in finance for a while. And that's when I was doing real estate part-time. And it was so good that at the perfect time of the market in about 2006 or 7, I decided to quit my full-time corporate job and dive into real estate. So it was wonderful timing in hindsight, because that was, of course, right before things really took a crash. So I came to the decision in 2009 at this point, when things were really, really tough. And if I wanted to stay in real estate, I had to either get out or get better. And I was doing BPOs. I don't know if you remember those, broker price opinions. They're basically very cheap work that a broker could do for a lender, because there's not enough appraisers, never hasn't been for a long time. So the lenders would need evaluation of properties, and they would go to local brokers and do that work for very cheap, like $50 a piece, and you do an evaluation of a property. And I started doing quite a few of those, just to kind of tread water in real estate while things were really difficult. And I had someone that I had worked with at a previous job who was an appraiser. He became an appraiser like 2003, 2004 when I became a broker. So we certainly kept in touch. And I would call him and ask him questions about, hey, Dave, how do you do these adjustments? It got very analytical, much over my head as far as, pricing properties was concerned. So I would call on him for assistance. And after, so many phone calls and conversations about how to, whether it's do adjustments or do comparisons on properties, he finally said, Steve, get your appraisal license. I'll kind of sponsor you, because that's how it's kind of done in the appraisal world. You kind of have a mentor for a couple of years while you're a trainee. So it's time consuming. It took me 2.5 years to go from trainee appraiser to certified residential appraiser. So it's a lot of time and a lot of work log, a lot of hours, reports to do before you qualify to become an appraiser. But he said, you want to do it, there's plenty of work. And at that point, of course, Fannie and Freddie were starting to buy or own all the properties again because things were going into foreclosure. So I, again, just to stay in the business and to even out cash flow, especially at that time, I started doing appraisals, and I was doing probably myself almost 50 appraisals a month.
Well, 2004, 2008 coming into it, it was a very different time in the Wild Wild West, especially in the appraisals. Tell us, it's not like it was today. Like a mortgage guy can use any appraiser they wanted to back then. It's kind of what we ran into issues with before the market crash, right?
Well, right, exactly. At least there was less regulation on it, so it did run a little Wild West back then, and that's why after I think 2010 is when they started putting more regulation and oversight on the appraisal community to make sure there was no commingling of opinions on property values.
But you could be a lender and you could have you might have to get on a certain list or whatever, but like once you're on there as a list, like the lender and the like these conversations don't happen, but the lender would talk right to the appraiser would talk to the real, like there's a lot more conversation between the parties involved back then, right?
Right, exactly. The lender, now the lenders cannot talk to the appraiser directly. The loan officer can't talk with the appraiser directly. That was instilled, after, like I said, around 2010, I think, or at least enforced more, after that point.
That's crazy though. Like just think about it. Like play out a situation here. Loan officer saying we need this to come out at 400 or whatever. Appraiser saying I don't know, and it's like hey, we're not going to give you the next 50 that you have lined up, and this guy's under the gun to make a moral call on what to do here. Like, all right, can I kind of justify this? Like that's
that would be in the email.
That's obviously part of the problem that led to
that would be in the email. Like, hey man, I need to hit this number. Like I remember seeing emails just like it would just be simply saying like, hey, I need you to make this work.
and then it was too. Or if you don't make this work, you only get a couple of chances, and then guess what? You don't get much more work from us. So
someone will make it work. Like that's the thing. Like they know someone will do it.
Right. Exactly.
How'd you overcome those pressures? Like, just curious.
I mean,
I took cash on the side. Did a whole bunch.
I would say I need a bag of cash, but I'd have to say it, in code. But no, when I was doing a lot of appraisals, I was doing for Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, so there was no interaction, obviously, with a loan officer at that point. So there was less of that. And then, of course, when it started coming back, a lot more of the lending in 2010 and beyond, then it was, like a wall between the lender and the appraiser already kind of formed or, enforced at that point. So I didn't have a lot to deal with that when I was doing appraisals in the beginning.
BPO, just so we glance over, a lot of people don't know what that is. BPO, broker price opinion, was basically an appraisal done by realtors that maybe cost under $100 for the banks to get done as a means of kind of having a pretty damn close value, right?
Right. It was a quick appraisal. It was a cheap appraisal, not an appraisal, but a cheap valuation of a property. Appraisers were backlogged, and there's limited amount of appraisers. So they're just the amount of work exceeded the number of appraisers available to do them. So they would, pay a broker a nominal amount of money to go ahead and do relatively a snapshot of the same thing, in the meantime.
We'll fast forward here real fast. Is there a shortage of appraisers today still, or is that?
Well, sure. Yeah, there absolutely is a shortage of appraisers. The average age of an appraiser is well into their 60s. I read at one point. So it's a dying, literally a dying profession for various reasons. But there's been a shortage for quite a while.
Gotcha.
Cool.
Gotcha.
I'd like to talk through like an actual appraisal, like from start to finish. Like you get the call from the lender, right? Or not from whoever. Like walk us through like tactically, because I see it from the consumer side. If I go to a commercial bank, they're going to say, hey, you have these three options. They're not going to say the names. They're going to say price and timeline. I pick one, and then what happens? Like you get the call from who? Like you don't get to talk to the lender. Like who is communicating with you? And just walk us through from that point till completion.
There's a couple of different contacts that I could get. I can get it directly from the lender, from their appraisal desk. So they have bigger lenders, guaranteed rate, first and tail. They'll have an appraisal desk. So I'd get a call, or my firm would get a call from the desk, and they'd order the appraisal and I'd be assigned it. There's also appraisal management companies, AMCs, that kind of handle that and for the lenders or in addition to the lenders. So I get contacted from the AMC directly as well, and then that appraisal would get assigned to me, depending on proximity and whatever other factors that they have in appraisal selection. So that's how I get the order, and then it could happen anytime once they have a file started with that signed contract. It could happen at any point after that. Sometimes they wait for attorney review period or something. It depends on the timeline of the contract. But shortly thereafter, of fully executed, I'd get contacted by one of those entities.
Okay, so you're contacted, and then you're contacting either the agent, whoever they're listing as the contact, to come out and actually do the appraisal. What research goes into your job before walking the property?
Really, a lot of times, depending on my workload, I might just go see the property first and foremost, and then kind of do my work after the fact. A lot of times, I don't want to have a preconceived or a biased opinion on valuation of a property before I lay eyes on it. So there's not a whole lot of prep work that I do other than scheduling the appointment with the listing agent or the homeowner, whomever, and then going to see the property. I might look at the neighborhood or something just briefly, but I don't do a lot of prep work before I go to the site. Most of my work is done after I see it.
Would you say that's an opinion of the rest of the industry, or is that just more your style? Do you think a lot of other guys are doing pre-work, or?
Yeah, maybe that's just more my style. And based on workload, sometimes I do 5, 6, 7, 8 appraisals a week, so I didn't have time to do prepping on each property I do. And I'm also a broker, so maybe that would just my style because I didn't have the time to do the prep work. I suppose some appraisers do have a pretty good idea of some likely comparables beforehand, so they might have a list already done. In some cases, I would, but not as often maybe as others.
From your standpoint, or your experience, like I mentioned, you have to have some people are just difficult to. You have such a short window. Like, how often do you struggle to get access or struggle to get a hold of a realtor? Like,
thankfully, because showing time, I'm able to go ahead and usually not have to make any calls and talk directly with a listing agent because that could be a problem. Sometimes getting in touch with a listing agent and getting in touch with any agent is difficult. So showing time and going directly to and doing an automated showing request is typically how I would do it now. But yeah, sometimes there's a timeline associated.
So as an appraiser, I just want to point something out here because this might be a little nugget. As an appraiser, you might see the listing, go right into MLS, and then click on showing time. You might not even reach directly out. You might just try getting instructions that way. Is that what you're saying?
Right. Absolutely.
So listeners, like if you're listing properties, like make sure that it's as easy access like that for the appraiser. So that's a pretty good tip right there.
Absolutely. And sometimes there's other factors, if there's a homeowner home, there's other things. I mean, I'd rather have all of that decided beforehand and known through showing time than have to get multiple phone calls to find out what the availability is on seeing or appraising that property.
What's the time frame these are usually doing? So from the time you accept a task to the time you have to have it submitted in?
Well, I mean, quicker and quicker as time has gone on with the more competition with the AMCs who highlight their benefits by saying we get it done cheaper and quicker. Well, that's been pushed and pushed. So I'm usually given, by the time I make the appointment to do the site inspection, they want it completed back to the lender in 2 days, 48 hours, outside of weekends, of course. But
AMCs, those came along as part of what we were just joking about a few minutes ago, as far as kind of putting another middleman layer of responsibility or separation. Correct? That kind of all came up during the crash.
Yeah, they've been around for a long time. They've just been more now. They've been tasked with more regulation, and I think lenders have been required to use them maybe a higher percentage of times just to make sure that they have more regulation on that process as a result, after, like I said, 2008 and whatnot. But they've been around for a long time, just in a smaller facet, I guess, or a smaller role.
Am I describing it right when I say like an AMC is just more of like a middleman that these larger lending institutions can like contract out an entire department to kind of handle that whole piece of their business?
Right. Exactly.
And then maybe put some risk or some of that regulation on top of them to deal with?
Exactly. That's exactly. It's just another layer, another entity involved between the lender and the appraiser that that they could use. Like I said, it helps with knowing they have regulatory standards and they're responsible for that, for that portion and that liability. It is just another entity in the middle of that relationship.
Got it. All right. So going back to, you have 48 hours to turn this around. I'm assuming this is purely just a residential type of proposal or appraisal.
Right.
All right, but even then, like, so what are you doing then? Are you going on just like most brokers and looking at comps? Like, what else goes into building that report? And also talk to us a little about the mindset. Let's start with the purchase. You have a purchase price. Are you just trying to justify that number? Like, how does that play into it? Because it's always, it's always magical that the appraised value comes back at the purchase price, right? It's funny how that works.
Right. Truthfully, I mean, you would think that in the perfect world, utopian society, that the appraiser would never see the contract price, right? But that would lead to a lot more problems, obviously. So we certainly do see the contract, and it's part of my report. So I know the contract price. So not saying, sure, there's some reverse engineering that goes along to find out, not just to hit the number, of course, but to find out why that buyer is willing to pay that for that property. And there's, of course, other factors than just the house. There's the conditions in the area, conditions in the market, inventory, and whatnot. So yeah, there's more to it. But the first thing I certainly do is just start looking for comparables. I have a list of updates on the house, upgrades, things that have been recently done. But that's then the comp search ensues.
Okay, so here's another one. Like, a lot of investors, this is what their investor or broker had on. They're like, oh, if I add washer dryer, like, what does that do for my value? Like, everyone thinks the world's this very quantitative. If I do this, then I get X. And the world obviously doesn't work in this nice linear fashion. But as an appraiser, you're almost, how do you make that work? It's got a side drive. It's got new window. Like, how do you put the quantified number on all these little upgrades to come up with a number? Like, it's, it's a lot of art, right? Like, no matter who you are or how good you are.
Exactly. It is a lot of art, but a lot of cases, and I tell realtors, I speak to other realtors about how to, and what they want. They want the book. They want my imaginary book of adjustments. They want to know how to be an appraiser.
Yeah, give me the cheat sheet and call it a day.
Right. Just look through this and, here's the number and here's how you figured it out. We don't need you anymore. But there's a lot more art to it. And some cases, like you mentioned, a side drive or something like that, those are market preferences maybe, but they may not be and likely won't be quantifiable adjustments on my report. So even though someone may be willing to pay more for certain things, they don't necessarily equate on my report to being something that I'm adjusting for. It's just kind of the uniqueness of a property and maybe a preference that one buyer may have for another to another on a property for that feature. So more of which is a preference than a quantifiable adjustment than you would think.
We've talked on this show a lot about as an investor, if you're trying to, maybe you've had a whole bunch of improvements, it's more maybe on a rehab or a cash out or the back end of a BRRRR, helping the appraiser, being friendly with them, give them the list of everything that you've done, so they don't have to guess on what you put into it. Talk to me from your standpoint, from your point of view, when the maybe borrower shows up to meet you to let you give you access and hands you blank, like, what's a perception from your side of that, and what's helpful and what's not helpful?
Well, are you speaking from like an ARV appraisal, or are you speaking from just a traditional?
Let's talk about a cash out refi. So I bought a
cash
property,
out, like, so
I've done
maybe
a ton
just
of
a
work
refi
to it, and now I want to get a stabilized loan. So it's not a purchase price. You don't have anything to go off of.
Right.
I had one of these this morning, right? And let's talk through like what to piggyback Mark's question. What's helpful? What is, hey man, you're crossing a line? What is, God, I hate this. Why do all investors do this?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have. I mean, that line is technically not trying to influence the value, but by stating, by the homeowner stating the value they need to hit, I'm much more casual than probably maybe other appraisers may be. So I certainly don't mind the conversation at the home and talking about the neighborhood, talking about the updates, of course, that have been done to the property. You want to steer away from throwing numbers out there from the homeowner standpoint or from the realtor standpoint for that matter. But I ask what they think their home is worth after these improvements, or what they think based on neighborhood I mean, they're a pertinent part, right? They live there. They know they probably keep track of what their neighbors are selling for, even more than I do, at least at that point. So I certainly take their opinion, and I'll take it with as much pertinence to my job as I can. But yeah, trying to sway numbers is certainly frowned upon.
Got it.
What
So,
about the
like,
rest of the industry? Are you? Would you call yourself more friendlier than average, or are you an average when it comes to what you just how you answer that? Like, is that?
Yeah, I've certainly heard a lot of stories about the appraiser not saying two words to the homeowner or the realtor, more often than not, or just basically giving, or even the appraisers responding with any kind of question saying, I can't talk to you. So I've heard them being pretty tight-lipped before. I'm certainly not. I don't, again, the conversation doesn't affect my valuation. So I don't quite see the proper problem with at least chatting and finding some information out that could be very pertinent to my report.
got it. All right. So now let's talk about, contesting an appraisal, right? So there's probably some squishy things. So maybe let's take one step back for our listeners. Let's talk about how comps are actually taken care of. You take a comp, and then you plus or minus it, you credit or debit it based on what it has or doesn't have compared to
Sure.
the subject property, correct?
Right.
Yep. And so, some of the things that are probably a little subjective are condition. You can write average, you can write good, you can write very good, you can write excellent, and then put a number next to it that is, plus or minus, based on the subject. Right. So, like, is that something that can be contested, or is contesting appraisal like, hey, you messed up the square footage, you messed up the bedroom count? Is it more black and white where you actually have a chance, and everything else is like, well, hey, it is what it is?
No, you're exactly right. Is you could refute the detail, like you said, the living space, or something. If a measurement was wrong, if certain items were wrong, just factually incorrect on the report, those are certainly things that you could contest in regards to those affecting the valuation. We'll see. But as far as fighting adjustments, no, that's the problem. You can never fight adjustments because essentially that is the opinion of the appraiser, and that amount for that adjustment is based on their skill set and their knowledge and their research. So you can never say, well, I believe you put that number too high for this condition adjustment, or you adjusted more for a 3-car garage than I think you should have. It's uncontestable. So that is a problem with contesting appraisals, is that you can only introduce new comparables or refute the facts on the appraisal itself. You can't really say much about the number or the price adjustments that were made.
Yeah, that's tough because I mean, just
It is.
two people in the industry who both have a lot of knowledge can just fundamentally disagree on a credit being 15 grand or 30 grand, right? Like,
Right.
If you put it out to Facebook and if people vote, it'd be like 50-50, right? Or people, everything in between. Like, it's just, there's art to it. There's not a hard line. It's two logical people can disagree and both be right.
Absolutely. And there's adjustments that I make that are larger on one report than on another report. So there's not that magical book that has an adjustment must be this for this. It varies. And it just depends on the neighborhood. It depends on the comparables. It depends on what I could see going on with what sold recently and what those had and how much impact maybe those features had or didn't have on the valuation based on the data. So it does vary, and it is subjective, and it does stink when that person, the appraiser, has those opinions, and contesting those opinions is very difficult after the fact. I tell realtors in my office all the time, the best way to beat an appraisal is to never contest it at all, to never get to that point, because at that point it's uphill. It's very uphill. You're trying to get someone to admit that their opinion was wrong, which is difficult in any circumstance. So
there's almost an ego attack there too, that you have to dance around. Like you're basically saying, hey man, I know more than you, and you're the professional, and even though you've been doing this 25 years, I'm not valuing what you think. Like there's like a total dig there.
Right. And then that person, that appraiser, I say, you're right, I'm stupid, and I was wrong. I was wrong, and I'll change it now. And
Yeah, I always tell people that. Think about what you're actually when you're contesting. You have to be careful what you're actually contesting, because what you're really it's everything. Yeah, you're totally attacking at their whole professional, their life. Maybe they've been like totally like value themselves solely on being an expert at being an appraiser.
yeah, it's tough. Like I said, avoid contesting it altogether. Maybe you didn't do enough work beforehand to avoid that problem, because again, it's uphill, very uphill battle to try to change an appraisal, then try to at least provide everything you can up front before that's written in black and white, because at that point there's not a whole lot of success in having that value changed.
And I think I see that happen. Tom, I bet you agree with me. You see a lot of people that are mad or contesting something. They didn't do some of the things up front, or prepare, or give you the off-market comp, or give you the list of all the updates, or have that casual conversation. So I see that usually being the red flag, the leading indicator in a lot of those scenarios where someone's pissed.
I tell realtors, if you're close on your numbers, on your contract price, and what you feel the value of that property is, you better meet that appraiser, because you can't complain after the fact if it doesn't hit, that, oh, I can't believe the appraiser didn't get that done for me. And it's like, well, maybe you didn't do everything you needed to do to help. I'm not saying sway, but at least help and give everything you can up front to do the best. I mean, that's part of your role, right? As from a real estate standpoint, is to kind of babysit that whole process, and the appraisal is part of that process.
To put it very black and white terms, if anyone has data for you to review, they should provide it to you for you to make your own call on what's valid and what's not.
And set the baseline.
Set the baseline, yeah.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, too, at least there's a personal connection. If you meet someone in person and you speak with them for 10, 20 minutes or something, maybe at the end of the day, that appraiser doing that report a couple of days later says, you know what, I'm gonna try a little harder on this one because they seemed like a good person or something. There's also that element that you can't know for certain, but it certainly can't hurt.
Well, I'll go one level deeper. Is you'll never know when you see that guy that you're contesting on the next appraisal.
Sure.
That's happened to me personally, where I've actually came a long way with a guy. But me contesting a young, stubborn, cocky age, contesting against his ego, and then he showed up on the next one. I got a really bad one, and I called him. I said, "All right, man, are we even, dude? We're gonna bump each other a lot more in the future. Like, are we even?"
Right. Yeah.
But it was like I had to put like $10,000 more into the next deal because it was the last deal I did. It was like 2 years before I contested. It was just a stupid move on my part. I was just being selfish or immature, I guess. We said comps there a little bit, contesting about comps. So talks about, if you guys are choosing 3 active, 3 sold for the most part when it comes to comparables. What if there is, I think it's really hard to contest with other MLS comps unless it's territorial. Talk to us a little more about contesting comps, when that could work and when it might not work, or off-market comps.
Well, yeah, that's difficult. Off-market comps are difficult because they have to be proven by 2 independent sources. The only time I use an off-market comp is when I'm either there's none other available, or I'm kind of directed to notice them. Say if a homeowner says, my neighbor just sold off-market, here's the address and here's what they sold for. Then I could go look it up in the recorder, the deeds and everything, and see what kind of information I could glean. But you can never really hang your value on off-market comps. You could, they can help support value, but it's hard to hang value on off-market comps because you ultimately don't know really the terms of that sale. There's very little information. So I don't know if that house was sold with all the personal property in it. I don't know. I don't know much of it. I don't have any pictures of it. There's limited information. So unless I'm forced to use them and there's no other way, it does require a lot more legwork to validate them for my own purposes for the valuation.
What type of independent sources are you allowed to use when it comes to the off-market side?
Well, the county recorder, if that deed has been recorded, sometimes it takes a little while, of course. Sometimes newspapers have it. I remember those. Sometimes they would record that.
Showing your age, Steve.
I know. I know if you get the settlement statement, ultimately that's fantastic. You have the HUD, again, I'm aging myself by calling it a HUD, but yeah, the settlement statement, the Remine or Realist, or, there's some other sources I suppose you could try to track, but you need 2 independent sources to kind of validate that that off market comp for sure.
Man, I still call it a HUD. Like
I know.
people are looking at me like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "Nothing, nothing." The closed statement, man.
So,
Hey, what about location wise? Because I, for me, I always think about this scenario. For me, this is not as true today, but 5-6 years ago when we owned a bunch of properties in Eastwood Lawn, we had appraisers that would take comps from Westwood Lawn, just on the other side of Cottage Grove. It might only be a few blocks, but it was a big difference in that few blocks. Are you open to? Because sometimes an appraiser might come in and he doesn't do anything in a particular neighborhood or a particular part of the city or the city at all, and they weren't aware of some of these kind of unofficial boundaries where life is just really different, our values are different. Are you guys open to that sometimes?
No, absolutely. That's very difficult when it comes to, obviously, when I'm more on the suburbs and I do more of my work nowadays out here. It's a little easier. There's a little less delineation between neighborhoods. Even if I can of course go outside of the neighborhood. It's likely a competing neighborhood, a very similar type neighborhood. So my radius would be larger, maybe a mile, maybe even more, depending on where. But if I go in the city, now that's neighborhood specific, like you mentioned. Now there's blocks. Now it's much more densely populated, which means that the best comparables are absolutely in that building or in that block or certainly in that neighborhood, because as we know in Chicago, the delineation between neighborhoods could be significant and just a few blocks away, like you said. So I would certainly want someone who's familiar with that part of the city to not step over those unofficial boundaries, because that could make a big difference on value.
Yeah. So that's a good call. And then another one is when you have almost like that unicorn, right? And we've run into this too, where, we've done something that hasn't been done in the neighborhood before, right? And you're pushing up against, all right, do you go outside of a mile? Do you go past 9 months? Like how do you start reconciling some of that? This thing's on a triple lot, or, those nuances where this does not fit in the box. There's not going to be comps. Like, how do you make that work?
Yeah, you certainly have to expand the radius, or the appraiser has to expand the radius, expand the time frame, going as much as a year back. Then they would have to, now if you jump outside of neighborhood unofficial or official neighborhood boundaries or market areas for that matter, now there's more work that is involved for that appraiser, because now they have to identify if there is a quantifiable difference between this school district or this neighborhood versus that neighborhood, and then put a number on that as well. So no, you can definitely find it, but there's just going to be more work. You have to find a comparable, right? You have to find your bracketed features. So they have to find something that's a triple lot or newly renovated, gut rehab. They have to find it. They just may have more work to do to have it make more sense on their grid. But there's no rule as far as what they can and can't do. They need to find the most suitable comparable for that property. So they shouldn't be restricted by much else outside of a year old or something like that. They just have to write a little bit more, do a little bit more work to make a case for it.
Got it. And as a baseline, like let's say it's a typical quote unquote, single family home, and you're going to have comps. What do you usually go back 6 months? Do you usually stay within, the subdivision, 4 block? Like, is there some standard you try to start with?
Yeah, I mean, there's no standard as far as there's overlays that the lender, requires as far as having comps maybe more recent, which of course is pertinent. But as far as what I start with, certainly most recent, especially in a shifting market like we've kind of been experiencing here in some areas, is best. So certainly I want to start small, start neighborhood, start 90 days and move out from there, get the best comps I can. But I'll go back 6 months. Like I said, I'll go back a year. I'll go in the suburbs. I'll go a mile. I'll go even 2 miles. I'll stay in the market area. I'll try to stay, of course, in that school district, or at least a very similar type school district. But I certainly want as close by and as recent as possible, but that's ideal. That's often not the case, especially with the low inventory environment we've been in for years. So you have to expand those out. And again, it might involve a little bit more work for the appraiser, but it needs to be done. So there's no rules, but you kind of start small and expand from there to find what you need.
Got it. That all makes sense. All right, so man, I feel like we're just beating you up with appraisal questions here.
Yeah.
Like everything we want to know. So,
Well,
Mark, go ahead, jump
speaking of
in.
beating up, like, have you ever had any interesting stories, any threats, any like people contesting, beating up, like black guys, like any fun? Like you've been doing it for long enough. Any, you walk into anything crazy and an appraisal, like you can't believe they left that out.
Yeah, I mean, a bunch of them. I mean, I mean, I've been on, because I'm a realtor too. I've been on the wrong end of a bad appraisal as well, and that's always makes for fun because then I of course have to contest it, and I'm providing I know the handshake, I know all sorts of things to try to contest it maybe a little stronger than the typical broker would, and then I get into back and forth with that company or that appraiser on on my due diligence versus theirs. And yeah, it's gotten to the point where I basically I've told an appraiser that they're terrible, and they and I hope that they never appraise any property of mine. They don't know what's going on in this market, and even their management said, after, because I wrote quite a bit of stuff and provided a lot of data. Even their management, the AMC that was managing that appraiser, so to speak, they even actually offered me a role in their group after the back and forth, because he felt that I did a really good job of trying to prove my case. Now, it didn't matter at the end of the day. I didn't win it. I didn't get what I wanted, but I certainly showed him and management there that I knew what I was talking about.
You won the argument, but you lost the war.
Yeah, right, exactly. I got into the ego factor as well, I guess.
So what I heard there is if you're an appraiser, you don't want to have to deal with Steve's clients.
Right. No, that's right. But I'll meet them there, and I'll make sure that they know. Like I said, I'll give them the handshake, and they'll know that I'm not. I should not be trifled with. Yeah.
There you go. All right, so we're talking a lot about in the residential space here, but a lot of our listeners are house hackers. They're buying a 2-unit, 3-unit, 4-unit property here in the city. So, I've seen even on my appraisals, it's still the comp approach. That's still going to be the majority of the weight. But you see, they do take into account rents. They do, I don't know if this is Chicago specific, but you see like the GRM, the gross rent multiplier for that area. So like, talk to us a little about just how important are the rents if someone's looking to buy that 2, 3, 4 unit, or is it still 90% comp?
No,
it's just extra pieces of paper for us to have.
No, the income approach, I don't do as much income approach, for my purposes out in the suburbs as obviously would be going on for rentals, and especially in the city. But the income approach is more important there for sure. I mean, to any investor, it doesn't really, the sales comparison approach is, sure, it adds, it's another look, but it's not the most important. You want to know what you're making off of that property, because that's really truthfully, that's what it's worth, is what you're making off of that property. So rents are extremely important, and rent values, and it's difficult because those rent values may or may not be market rent, which is part of the problem sometimes, I think. They could be longtime tenants and they're getting a discount. They could be a landlord that just doesn't know. It could be various factors, or it could be unreported, where that landlord is renting out directly to tenants and it's never on something like the MLS. So it's you can't really rely on that data. So it's difficult. It's hugely important for the income approach, but there needs to be MLS data for that to be done properly, just because then it's true and most accurate market rent for that type of property. Everything else is just too difficult, and there's too many variables to rely upon.
Before we wrap up here, shifting market, one of the things you have to check mark on every appraisal is declining, stable, or increasing market. Not many people really know what that is. I know I saw the increasing before the crash, and then it was declining for a really long time, and then it was stable for a while. How is that one box these days here in 2023? How are you having to, what defines those different markets?
Through the MLS, there's under reports, and I tell realtors in my office and other offices for that matter, if I go and talk with them, it's very significant. More so now, of course, in a shifting market than it is in typical times. It was been stable for quite a while before the last few years. But the only way to hit some of these values, or not hit the values, but only way to validate some of these prices is because the market has been increasing month over month. So in the MLS, what is used in appraisals, it's the 1004 MC, the Market Conditions Report. And that's found in the MLS under reports, under Market Conditions Addendum. And that'll show you the 7 to 12 month, 4 to 6 month, and last 3 months. So in three columns. And then basically those numbers, the median prices, determine whether that market has been going up, remaining stable, or declining. And that is put on the report, and that's reflected on the report, on every report. And that could determine if it's an increasing market or declining market. If there's an adjustment made to, say, a comp 6 months prior, that in the report, whether or not that value has gone up and should be adjusted, accordingly, or down. But those numbers are derived through the Market Conditions Addendum. They're in every appraisal report. And there's been increasing market conditions and even some decreasing as of late.
Gotcha. I love explaining that. That's such a small section on there, but a lot of people don't realize really how much influence that could have on being able to reach for values. All right. Tom, any more questions, or should we wrap?
No, this is all good stuff. I mean, I just want to reiterate to everyone listening, just don't make the appraiser's job any harder than it needs to be, right? Like, make this as easy as possible. This could hold the key to your deal or your refi, and just smile, be ready, send whatever they need beforehand, be ready with your comps. They ask for a survey, hunt it down, don't take 4 days to get it to them. Just all that stuff. Same with your lender, man. Just be on top of your game.
I don't want an encyclopedia when I get there either of all the data that they've ever found. I don't need that either. It's helpful for some comps, but I don't need the history of everything of the entire town with me when I get there.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, awesome. All right, this wrap. Steve, you ready?
Yeah, sounds good.
We didn't talk too much today about you being a broker, but you're a successful broker. You're an appraiser. You've been self-employed here for almost a couple decades, and you're up and down. And what's your competitive advantage? How have you been able to do this well? So many other people wish they could.
Gosh, like I said, I think just knowing more about every part of the process is helpful. Everyone tries to stay in their lane, and that's always one of the mantras. But really, especially in a real estate transaction, there's a lot to it. So the more you know about different parts of it, I think, is the better broker you're going to be, the better investor you're going to be. If you just stick in your lane and not aware of what else is going on behind the scenes, then I think you're a disservice to your own portfolio, and you're a disservice to your clients if you're doing brokerage.
He knows how to beat up appraisers. That's what I heard.
That's right.
There you go. All right. What is one piece of advice you would tell someone that is yet to buy their first property here in the Chicagoland area?
Wow, one piece of advice that I would tell somebody? Gosh, that's hard. I don't know what's. I guess so. I guess see a good sample size. I guess some people. I think you need to, no matter what you think you want, what you think you want. I think you got to see the market. You got to really enjoy the area, the neighborhood, even more so than the house itself. You can't change the other factors. So you have to know that you're going to be in the right area, the right neighborhood. And if the house works and the other two things fit, then that's a workable deal. Don't look at the latter as the most important, because you can't move your house.
All right. What do you do for fun?
I have a 9 and a 6-year-old, so I do whatever I'm told by them for fun. And this summer is coming to a close, so hopefully my role as entertainment director is coming to an end as well. But yeah, other than that, I try to keep fit. I try to get some time with my spouse as much as I can, and yeah, just get outside while the weather's still good here.
All right, give us a good book, podcast, or self-development activity that you'd recommend to our listeners.
Other than this podcast, I listen to Tom Ferry, real estate side. I don't listen to much other podcasts, maybe Joe Rogan once in a while or something. But books-wise, self-development, I really listen to Ryan Holiday. I like him. Ego is the enemy, obstacle is the way. I like
Mark's got his Vanity Fair one, Conspiracy. The Hulk
Hogan.
Oh
man, have you read Conspiracy, Steve? About the Hulk Hogan story?
I don't even think about it.
It's Ryan Holiday. It's a book that's not like any of his other books. It's called Conspiracy. I listened to it. It was amazing. Like I couldn't put it down or stop listening. And then I gave it to Tom the other day, and I think he's liking it too.
It's called Conspiracy by Ryan Holiday.
Yeah. It's very different.
Yeah, full disclosure, it's not like his other books. This is more entertainment than anything, but it's awesome.
It's stoic though. He gets a little stoic in this one too.
Yeah, no, I enjoy all of his work, so I'll have to look that one up.
And if you like to, you're at that age. Hulk Hogan was a big part of your childhood,
sure.
so this will really hit home with you. Like so,
Yeah, I'm intrigued.
Yep. All right. Besides yourself, name one person in your local network you would highly recommend to other investors as a quality resource.
Well, you, Mark, I would
That can't be us. It can't be us. I'll take it. Don't get me wrong. I appreciate it, but
no, I do recommend you guys. Who would I recommend for a quality resource? Gosh, I don't know. I mean, like I mentioned, some of the Tom Ferry and stuff. As far as you know.
What about locally? You got any good attorneys? Any good lenders you refer? Anybody like that?
Yeah, I work with. I recommend working with brokers as far as mortgages are concerned. They know their job. They know how to get done. So I work with First Centennial myself as far as lenders go. With Melissa Stewart is my person there. I work with Mark Nolte. I think I met him through GC. Mark Nolte, the attorney. I still work with him on transactions. I think Christine worked with him for years. So no, I stick with my people because there's a lot of variables in real estate, and you want to make sure that the people you have involved in the transaction know what they're doing and do it well.
Mark Nolte, he was a short sale king back in the day.
Yeah. Not many of those now, but yeah.
Well, awesome. Steve, thank you so much. You provide a ton of value to our listeners. How can they learn more about you? Is there any way they can provide value to you?
Yeah, I mean, contact me, reach out, any questions. I have no problem. I do, tax appeals. I mean, I'm a good resource, I think, for anybody as well, knowing a little bit more about the business than just a typical realtor or appraiser. I know multiple sides of it. So yeah, I can be contacted at through myself, through my LinkedIn, through my Facebook. I'm pretty open and out there. So yeah, provide
We'll link to all that. We'll link to all that in the show notes. All right, cool.
All right.
Mark,
Chicago Fact Time.
All right. This nothing against Steve. I look forward to this every episode. So, all right, today's Chicago Fact. We're playing for where I wrote down here on my scratch notes here. Trent Manners, which doesn't sound like real, but he's from Evanston, but it just sounds very cliche. But Trent Manners bought a T-shirt from Evanston. Today is Chicago Fact is brought to you by Appeal.tax. Tim Jacobs over at KSN. So, Trent, if myself or Steve get this question right, you get a $50 card brought to you by Appeal.tax.
Okay.
All right. So, Steve, I believe your actual brokerage office is in downtown Geneva, if that's correct. So I pulled the Geneva question here. So the famous windmill, do you say Fabian? How do you say that windmill?
Fabian.
All right. So it's the best example of an authentic.
Right? Oh, that wasn't the question.
That wasn't the question.
No, that's not the question. Come on, it's harder than that. Mark has an ego. We got to put him down a few pegs. We make this tricky. So it's the best example of an authentic Dutch windmill. It's one of those ones that I don't know. Even I knew this one as a kid, but what I did not know is in the early 1990s they talked about it was becoming unsafe. They were gonna condemn it, and then local citizens rallied. And in 1997 they hired some Dutch guy to go and preserve it and fully restore it. My question to you, and you'll have multiple choice, what was the cost of that restoration? And was it 100 grand, 400 grand, 900 grand, or $2 million?
Oh man,
we got
nothing costs 100 grand when governments are
exactly.
restoration. The word restoration 100 grand, so I'm gonna give it 100 grand right away.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's just the overhead. Continue.
Yeah, that's literally the
Project
attorneys that
manager
draft
for the
up the
project.
paperwork.
Yeah,
Man, I'm gonna go with I'm gonna go with $2 million.
$2 million. All right, Steve, what do you want to go with?
900 or $2 million, but yeah.
Go with 900, Steve. That way we give Trent a better chance of winning. You go with 900, I'll go with $2 million.
Oh, okay. We can choose differently. Okay, yeah.
Yep.
Let's do it.
The strategy has paid off, Steve. $900K. Mark, nice teamwork there. Way to.
So maybe if it was today, it would have been $2 million based on.
I wanted when you said $2 million, I was going to say that. Remember, it's 97.
Yeah, I guess I would have thought that again. All right, man, Trent, you win. You get $50 gift card brought to you by Appeal.tax, KSN, Tim Jacobs. Thank you for being a sponsor. Man, Steve, thanks for coming on. It was awesome having you on here.
Anytime.
Thank you as always. Tom, is it too soon? Can we announce the upcoming party, or at least the idea of it?
Oh, the Fiesta on 47th?
Yeah, so Fiesta on 47th. I believe we'll put some more official information on there, but we're gonna have Fiesta on 47th at the grand opening of I don't know.
Dreamcatcher Cafe, Ignacio.
Yes, Ignacio. So we're gonna have a party Fiesta on 47th. It's gonna be a Thursday night. I think the first or second Thursday in October. Obviously, more to come, but we're really excited about this. More of a neighborhood type event. He's got an event space. He's got the cafe space. We're going to see about closing on the street. It's going to be a good time. So stay tuned for more details on that.
Episode 212.
Yeah, episode 212 is awesome. It's all about back of the arts. So stay tuned for that information. Steve, thanks again. Tom, thank you. Listeners, we'll see you next week.
Thank you.